So I've called the meeting to order, special meeting. We have one topic, and that is the flood resiliency action plan framework. I'll turn it over to Mr. Kenny.
At President Managers, we have Eric and Andrew this evening, and just go over some of the background. There's quite a bit of information that was shared with the board already. Been an item of discussion for some number of years, but we know that it's a complex topic of conversation, discussion, and there's been some back and forth with the city of Forest Lake, but we're just trying to get to some of the next steps in terms of plan adoption and be able to prepare to work with DOR on developing some, at least some initial recommendations for potential projects. I think also it's going to be a piece, and I guess maybe I should. Dr. Bose, are you leading the PowerPoint? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Kind of focus on what the entire effort is and what it is not. So I think that'll be equally important. Andrew Schottmiller and I had a conversation last week to help clarify what it is not. So then, but it's important to have those discussions. So make sure we're moving in the same direction.
So are we gonna get to the city's letter to us? I mean, it's all wrapped up in that one letter, as far as I can tell. You know, whether we're gonna be able to have more than 3 projects or, you know, what the issues are.
Well, I think again, that's kind of where we want to focus on the conversation about what this effort is and what it is not, and then that'll help answer those questions and address them for the board, well, mostly for the board, and then to understand some of the thoughts that we have on the letter to the city back, why it's really like, sure, okay, we can make those changes. It's not going to make any meaningful impact of what we would propose for some of the next steps going forward.
We have some slides that kind of go over their comments as well at the end.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's great, because that's where I hoped we would end, is get this refresh on this project. It's 4 years at least, I think, in the making, maybe even 7, you know, with all the talking and looking for the right, you know, way to present it and so on, because it really addresses 4 different things for us. You know, it's not just the floodplain, it's the green corridor concept. I know that's not the right technical name, but the whole concept was to save what we can of unused land and let that be part of the process of dissipating the impact of floods.
Right.
You know, and there were more over the weekend, and of course, if you watch those things and how devastating they are for other states that are going through this, you know, our rains are getting heavier, we know that. And so we need to be proactive, not reactive to this. And if the city doesn't get that, then we need to find a way to make them understand. And hopefully that is what we're headed for. So I'm glad you set it up that way. And with that being said, let's start.
Sure. So good evening, everybody. Eric and I are here. We're going to be kind of tag teaming the presentation. This is an outline of what we're going to talk about, but the first part is just a project overview, as Mike said, to go over where we've come from, what the motivation was, all of the steps we've put in, and then what the project outlook is. And then the second half is really about the framework results and going through anticipated benefits, the city's comments, and the next steps. So you're going to hear throughout the presentation from both Eric and I. I'll just be driving the PowerPoint. Okay, so as Mike said, we're going to start off with what this project does. What essentially it creates a framework for flood planning, and what that means is it provides a proactive approach for flood planning within the watershed district. We do provide some options for storage projects within the framework to meet district goals that have already been established. The watershed management plan already has a flood storage goal in it. It gives the district the most accurate information for priorities for vulnerable infrastructure. So part of this framework was going through and looking out through the entire watershed district, then prioritizing areas with vulnerable infrastructure, and then really honing in the resolution in those areas, and then also bringing awareness to vulnerable infrastructure under extreme storms. And then providing options again for storage opportunities with multiple benefits. What this doesn't do, we're not prescribing a jurisdictional floodplain. We're not, with this framework, we're not impacting permitting in any way. We're not locking in projects on developable land. We're not imposing a floodplain standard or updating any sort of FEMA flood maps that impact insurance. So this is just a planning tool to provide resiliency within the watershed district for flood management now into the future. So the motivation of this project, flooding poses a risk to water resources and infrastructure. Flood resiliency planning is becoming standard across the state. You're not the only watershed district undertaking this activity. And then particularly watershed districts are well and uniquely suited to do long-term flood planning because there are no municipal boundaries, and it deals with the boundaries in which the floods can be impacting all infrastructure. This fits the mission of the watershed district. It's also one of the priorities of the watershed management plan. And like I said before, the watershed management plan already includes an existing goal of 99 acre feet of storage, and you're already making progress towards that goal. Resiliency planning like this saves money in the long term. A reactive approach, according to the University of Minnesota, costs 8 to 15 times more than a proactive approach because you're not you're providing storage and not having to rehabilitate damage. Eric's going to talk a little bit about the timeline for flood planning and the roadmap of the project.
Yeah, so this is just kind of I think this is one thing we got tripped up in our 514 meeting. I want to provide a little background on just like how we kind of got to where we are in the resiliency planning process, and then kind of how, you know, Atlas 15 came about. But from 1961 to 2013, we were using 5.9 inches for 100-year rainfall depth. The 100-year rainfall depth isn't, you know, this should happen every 100 years, but it's the 1% chance. So that relied on kind of limited station data that was published in 1961. And then in 2013, NOAA published Atlas 14 that looked at, that rainfall data was developed over an 8-year period from 2005 to 2013. It was published in 2013 and it included 50 more years of data. At that point, our 5.9 inch event went to 6.95 inches. 2014 to 2016, a lot of the agencies in Minnesota started requiring Atlas 14. June of 2014, MnDOT started with requiring it for hydraulic design. FEMA and Minnesota Watershed started incorporating Atlas 14 as the standard for their 2, 5, 10, 100-year events. And we also required it for Atlas 4 for development permitting. It was also during that time that they realized that increase from 5.9 inches to 6.95 inches wasn't just because they had 50 more years of data. They also saw a trend in that. And at this point, they started figuring out or determining whether it wasn't just more data. This isn't just a stationary 100-year 1% AEP or 1% storm. It was actually trending up. So then they started looking at additional, you know, rainfall. And I think in 2022, ultimately, they said, all right, let's go look at data, especially between include everything from 2005 to 2022. So it includes like the next 17 years of data in that analysis. And then there's gonna be some other non-stationarity analysis within that, also looking outward, but in that last bullet point, they were also seeing. We also had a lot more mega rain events. We have a really good history, or a really good, starting in 1970. When the University of Minnesota and a bunch of other agencies started collecting or made a rainfall collection service throughout throughout Minnesota. So since 1970, we have a really good idea of these mega rainfall events. And 11, so we've had 16 of those historic mega rain events from 1970 to 2021, and 11 of them occurred in that last 20-year period. So they were 2.5 more common during the 21st century than they were between 1970 and 2000. And then it just, furthermore, the DNR Climate Office assembled the list.
Quick question, just,
Yeah.
so that 2.5 times, is that how you got to your 90% confidence that was?
No, I'll get into that though. Yeah, let's come in on that.
About 2.5 times. About
Yeah.
that much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we'll,
Just curious.
yeah, no, that's, you're one slide ahead of me, but this was just. These are those historic rain events that the DNR compiled, and these are 6 inches of rain. These events are in which 6 inches of rain covers more than 100 square miles in 24 hours or less. With at least 8 inches falling somewhere in that area. So, Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District is 49 square miles, I think, or about 50. So these mega rain events are, to classify it as a mega rain event here, had to be 6+ inches over 1,000, and then, 8+ inches somewhere within there. But you see some of these totals, and this we passed around, but there's 12 inches in Roseau, 10 inches fell in a 36-hour period, 8.9 in Fairmont. A 3-day total of 16.3 inches, 9.4 inches, 9.3 inches, 9.7 inches, 8.6 inches. So these are pretty big rain events above and beyond just our 100-year events. So this has a list of them. I can share that link elsewhere, but we were kind of thinking like, well, how do we look out into the future? Because it was this 2016 to 2019 period where people were starting to look at this new rainfall event from Atlas 14, and they're like, well, what if this continues on? So that's where we started looking for a new rainfall value here. And what we did was, at the time was, 5.9, that was a TP40. We looked at that trend from TP40, which was developed in 1961, to Atlas 14, which was published in 2013, but it really only included rainfall up until 2005. Now, we thought, okay, what about next century, 2100? What should we use for that? And it just so happens our, upper 90th percentile kind of aligns with that trend. So from 6.95 to 9.22, that's just an extrapolation. But, we started looking at that 9.22 inch event, which in some cases it's almost a 500-year or 0.2% chance rainfall. But that's where we started using that number. The state climatologist said, that's probably the best available data to use, the most scientific data to use, and it does kind of follow this trend if we kind of look forward through 2100. And it will be interesting when Atlas 15 comes out, because we'll have another point on that line at about 2022, which we'll see if it does that new number is that new number 7.2? And then they'll also have more scientific projections out to the 2100. So it'll be interesting to see where those 2 points plot from our extrapolation that we did with, the Minnesota State climatologist and other entities back in 2019 period, when we were trying to develop, what should we be looking at? I remember working with Hennepin County at the time, and I know other watersheds have used this kind of upper 90th percentile. So
that year is actually 2100 though.
Well, it's somewhere in the future, right? Yeah, and that it aligns on this trend. If you were to continue that out. I didn't think it would align that cleanly, but it does. So that trend line is really just from 5.9 to 6.95. And then I plotted that on a different. So that wasn't included in the trend analysis, but it just kind of aligns there very cleanly for this. It might not align there cleanly if we're in another area. I mean, at 6.95 and Comfort Lake Forest Lake is a little different than maybe like the West Metro that I'm more familiar with, where it's like 7.2 inches, you know. So yeah. But does that kind of give you an idea of kind of why we started using that 9.2?
15 will give you a date, so it's either a linear curve or maybe exponential.
Yeah. We'll see, and Atlas 15 will also probably give us 3 different scenarios, because they're trying to tie that to like temperature increase or other variables that might show different trends.
But I think watershed districts are also choosing this because they're thinking about, updating infrastructure that have 50-year lifespans. You wanna think that far out so that you're not just designing infrastructure for now, but you're thinking about in 100 years, what it's gonna look like, just to save that money. All right, so, this has been done throughout many phases, and Emily sent out a really nice summary of all the times we've kind of talked about this, starting way back in 2020, looking at flood hazard mapping, and as this kind of triangle progresses, we're going from a very coarse look at things, and then we're becoming more finely tuning where we're looking throughout the watershed district. So just the first step is kind of just thinking about flood hazard mapping, how is the water connecting throughout the watershed district. Then we looked at flood vulnerability mapping, so that's where we're comparing, where the water is flowing to who and what is impacted by flooding. So that is looking at infrastructure, where people are living, so the social aspect of it and the environmental aspect of it. And then we established priority areas, the first being the urban core of Forest Lake, and then also the Sunrise Corridor, and then the third being the Shields Lake area, which all of them are in the framework, all 3 priority areas. Then we dug even deeper and we looked at any sort of pinch points or areas within the network in which maybe the infrastructure is not available, the stormwater infrastructure is not available, and the storage on the landscape is not available, and that can cause the water to build up on the landscape. We presented those results to the community to identify blind spots and get buy-in. So we had several workshops with our communities, and then taking that information, we distilled that down into looking at possible storage projects, short, medium, and long term. And so these are projects and policies, and they're all at the concept level right now. And so at every stage that we're going to take this, we are going to be listening to our partners, because the partnership is key in order to provide this. So this is kind of the last part of the project overview, but the outlook. So this is a framework, as I said, for future planning, to be proactive for flooding instead of reactive. We do already have a grant in hand to further investigate some of the project's concepts that are outlined in the framework, and Eric's going to talk a little bit about that. And then I also just want to iterate, this framework has a long shelf life, so we don't have to act super quickly, and assume that there's a lot of reworking we have to do constantly. But the framework itself should be finalized so that we can make progress on the goals, and also progress with the grant that we have. Some future ideas, as I talked about for the framework, are short, midterm, and long-term solutions, including projects and policies that are outlined in the framework. And then, as with all district projects, it's an adaptive process. So as we find new information, we can update the models, and we can also, as we get new partners or more ideas from our partners, we can update how we make those decisions on short-term, midterm, and long-term.
I think it's important to, right around this juncture right here, that you include that this is one of the reasons for the district's founding. Is we had too much water. I mean, nobody even thinks about that as being a pollutant, but it is. When you have too much water going through a river system or a lake, it's harmful and therefore it pollutes. And all the stuff that carries with it too. But just the volume can be a pollutant, a trigger. And so, I think it's important to, when we're talking about this, just to make sure the citizens know that that's why we exist. And it's the major reason why we exist. And so, I think it's important to just tie it back to us and why we're here.
Exactly. Yeah, the watershed district should be heading up activities like this
Mhm.
because they're in charge of the whole network of water, not.
Well, we saw the damage, right? So we experienced that damage. And now we want to protect all of the watershed areas. And this is how you do it.
All right, before we get into results, do we have any discussions about where we are or the phases? Or we can talk about results and kind of,
Just a kind of a high level question, our 99 acre feet storage. How do you see that as a relative number to what we're seeing we really have to do in the future? Is this kind of like a little pothole that we're trying to fill up? Or I can't tell from, what the acreage of some of these projects have to be.
Right.
Although the three we're probably gonna do south of here, there's a lot of acreage there.
yeah.
The wetlands can hold a lot, I'm sure.
I think it's a good place for us to start, and we've already done 40 acre feet of that 99, and that 99 is over the whole watershed district. So when we're talking about in our study area, it would likely be more. We don't set a target in this project for how many acre feet we need to provide storage. This is just the framework, but we are going to be exploring the cost benefit of all of these different projects that we're proposing. And okay, if we put storage in this area, where are we alleviating flooding in the future in these target areas? There's also things like updating stormwater infrastructure, so sizing pipes and things like that as well that we have to think about. Wetland, being strategic about wetland protections and our natural resource inventory and things. So this doesn't prescribe any goals for storage at this point, but in the future it will.
Well, we have one property that is already designated, the Ducharme Farm. And so, how many acres is that? 40?
Yeah, it's 37 or something.
Yeah. So there's the start.
Yeah.
How many feet are we gonna have of water over that course? I mean, what's the maximum that you wanna hold above the ground?
It depends on where you are, but in terms of navigability on roads, you have to stay below 2 feet of water or the cars start to. And also you have to think about velocity of the water when people walk. I think it has to be under 3 feet per second.
I think it's 2 feet per second.
Yeah, 2 feet per
2
second
feet.
before you start getting washed away. But if you're thinking about infrastructure, you wanna provide freeboard for water entering buildings. So that's also something.
Yeah, that's pretty agricultural right there, so there's not problem with sidewalks or,
Sure.
there's 61, of course, but. Yeah, okay.
Dr. Wilkinson,
Yes.
we look at the proactive framework, where are we currently in this cycle of design, implement, monitor, evaluate, and assess progress?
We're still kind of in the evaluation standpoint. So we've used the best available data that we have, which is Eric kind of talked about the progression of what that looks like or how that was made. So that's kind of the monitor situation. And so now we're kind of evaluating concepts.
As part of this, this first initial modeling piece was just looking at like what are risk or what are some of our impacts, and that's what some of the results are. What are the impacts to infrastructure currently, and if we were to increase rainfall events to the infrastructure / roadways, buildings and streams, and even our storm sewer network, as Ann was saying. So that's what we were trying to figure out was like where are our problem areas were areas of vulnerability, and from that, we realized they were mainly in, City Forest Lake, and, Wyoming. The Shields Lake drainage area. So those were kind of the two areas we focused on, to see like, what are those impacts? So, we have a couple slides here that kind of review the results, but, yeah, as far as like in this cycle, we're before design.
Yeah.
Right now, we're trying to put a plan together to kind of go through this cycle. Cause the projects and, we're talking a lot about the projects we've already identified, but more projects will be identified as we continue, looking. But those were kind of the first areas we highlighted as opportunities. But in some of those areas, like, when you're saying 3, I think we have the green light on 3, but, we probably have, 3 to 6 more within those 12 areas where we have a yellow light from the city right now saying, we're open to it if we can also incorporate, water quality and volume control and some other avenues to help us develop or redevelop our streets. And, a lot of these projects have stack benefits. I mean, there's sometimes where we develop a water quality project, like the Highway 61, which we have a slide on, but that Highway 61 project was for water quality. Well, that also gave us 22 acre-feet of floodplain. It also provided habitat. So a lot of these projects, these just looked for where can we put volume of water, but all these projects will have stack benefits. They aren't just going to, we wouldn't design them. They wouldn't have benefit if we just design them just to hold water. So I think that's kind of the next part of somewhere where we highlight these opportunities. We want to get to design. Between there, we got to figure out where's the best bang for our buck and what makes sense to do right now. Because I think, for some of those 13 projects where the city's just like, no, we can't do anything right there right now. We got to wait for development. Okay, well, at least we flagged it for those developers in the city saying, this is a good opportunity. Please come back to us when you have a developer and maybe we can contribute to their stormwater on that development to oversize it to help us with resiliency. Go above and beyond the current day standards to help us in the future.
To
Has
make
the
it,
mayor,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, who's this?
sorry, I just wanted to follow up my question. Has the mayor and the city council been informed of this framework for planning?
I think Emily could maybe give the best update on that.
Yes, the city council is aware of it. We've had a lot of back and forth with city staff, and they did share the draft comments and everything with the city council. And they had originally intended to have a city council member attend one of our past meetings, but we had some further back and forth with the staff and made some additional edits. And I think that was kind of what they were looking for. So city council is aware, but we've been working through the city staff primarily.
Well, I think President Anderson made a really good point in that we need to bring the city council and the mayor along in this process so they understand what it is that we're doing and why. Is there a disconnect there, do you think?
From my point of view, I think we've given the city 3 opportunities to comment on this. I believe we've incorporated all their comments in the framework. Those were the red lines in that framework that I think were presented to the board on the 14th. So as far as our action items, they only really had one, and we have a slide getting to that, but I mean, I think they only had like with our actions, our short-term, long-term, midterm actions, they only had issue with one policy, which was that they don't want further flood restrictions right now to limit their development. And so with that overlay district, they wanted to make sure that we weren't imposing additional floodplain rules. So we kind of softened the language on that one. And then they commented that, hey, incorporate some of our comments for these areas at this time. And so we added those red lines. And I think as we move on to the this next phase, once we get, if we can get past the framework phase and the plan. And get to that next phase that Emily and we've already secured funding for, we can then go back to the city with those 13 areas. We can look at, what makes the best sense for us and what makes the best sense for them right now. And then bring one of those 13 areas or two of those 13 areas to design and look for funding for it. So hopefully that's the next step after we get through this framework, is to, take another look at these 13 areas where we said there's opportunity, and figure out what projects we can do there that would, stack benefits, give us the best bang for a buck, and that makes sense for us and our partners to do right now.
Do you have a map of the area that the city doesn't want us to do anything in because of development potential?
I don't think we mapped those areas. I don't know, Mike.
Madam President, managers know well, but I mean, in general, they don't want us to really look at projects in the sites. They want to just be able to hold those locations that have been identified for potential future stormwater needs for future development. So a little bit of his understanding, so trying to get through like, okay, we understand that a lot of these are not, it's not like these things are inconsistent, so, but there are certain areas that the agencies, partners, whatever, the WACA rule requirements are not going to let them use wetlands for treating stormwater. So that's, so
But they're their own wacko.
right, but but when it comes to permitting, we review it and then we would address that if that was.
Okay,
So part of it is helping them understand what it is not, because right now there's concern, and I kind of get it. But just like, but we're trying to work on the education side of what this effort is not as well. Because there are certain sites that I feel would be suitable for projects that would benefit the city from flood prevention side that will not at all impact any future development. We're just talking about doing something within the current footprint of the wetland already.
well, I still think it's important for us, the board, to understand what areas are of concern to the city. So I haven't seen that map. I don't know if anybody else has.
In the report, there's all the.
Yeah,
Okay.
what did I say in the,
Okay. Oh, yeah,
That's the last
oh,
week.
that one, okay.
yeah, those,
So that's the
And there's
one.
comments on each one.
Yeah,
Okay.
the city.
All right.
So I mean, that's kind of where I was coming from, because
Yeah.
at the last meeting is that, we've got all these sites set up and they're reacting to some of them, but these sites were driven by the Atlas 90, right?
Well, those sites were just driven as like, hey, these are areas where there is currently no development and possible, and we could possibly implement floodplain projects there. They might be owned, they might be public areas, or, when we're just trying to highlight areas of opportunity, that's what we were trying to do in that first phase. We didn't say, hey, we're gonna do projects here, and that's where I think Forest Lake kind of thought we were getting, out over our skis.
But then Eric, you had to run the model. So if you ran the Atlas 1490 model.
Yeah.
Instead of getting 6 inches, you're gonna get 9 inches
Yeah.
of water. So that's gonna make it look a lot worse. Because you're not gonna probably use the standard in the future. Well, of course, a lot depends on what happens in September, right? When
Yeah.
Atlas 15 comes
Yeah.
out.
I think they might have some intermediary steps in there. They might not just have, the Atlas 15 median value and this 2010 value. They might have a 2050 value or 2080 value somewhere in there too.
Okay.
And
So,
we didn't run a model we ran the models, both current and future projections, and all of those maps are included in the framework. And then these are areas of potential projects that we could retain water on the landscape, but we didn't,
Okay.
it doesn't, it could
I'm
be
just
even.
trying to understand where they're
under current
coming from, and I can
situation.
see a developer. If you wanna meet with a developer and have him, and you try to apply the Atlas 90 standard. And plan for 16 inches when the other standard only requires 7 inches.
Yeah.
Who's gonna pay for the difference of cost?
yeah, but that's not really what we're after at all.
I know the developer won't, I know the city won't, so we won't have a project there.
well, no,
What's that?
So I think those are areas within both the current and future predicted floodplain
Yeah.
where we can capture water.
And you say we can work around that and
And we can work around
so
that.
everything's still in flux, a lot of it's still. in flux.
Very much in flux,
Especially with 2016, is it gonna be a linear or is it gonna be more of a?
very
that-
much in
so-
flux, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even
That's all I
our.
wanted to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Because-
those things can be addressed when we talk about the cost benefit in the next phase. Where we talk about how much volume it's going to be able to have, the co-benefits and the costs and possible partners. This is just areas within our priority areas that could possibly be a floodplain project, either from current 100-year situations or future. So we'll think about,
My only concern is I didn't want to back them into a corner. For the
definitely not,
future, that's really not real.
exactly,
Now we gotta undo that problem.
right,
These,
So,
oh, sorry, these areas that we're looking at would provide benefit right now.
Yeah.
For our floodplain.
yes.
They will also provide benefit in the future, so they would both be hydraulically connected to our current floodplain and our future floodplain.
And I think one of the most important things that we'll get to a little bit is that we did project out into the future because we were looking at areas where hospitals were getting flooded out or major roads were getting completely washed out in either current or future scenarios. That doesn't exist in the watershed district, thankfully, so we didn't have to really go down that emergency planning route. But since we do have the models looking at the areas, we can now look at, flood storage opportunities. We're not in a, the district is lucky in that a lot of that infrastructure is not projected to be impacted in that way. There are a lot of houses and roads
Yeah.
that can be
the
impacted.
final point I wanted to make is that the history we're coming from is a permitting history that's looked at as being
Correct.
too aggressive.
Yes,
So now we're coming with a whole new, second Bible, the New Testament coming out, it's replacing the Bible. And they're gonna say, more of the same. You guys are over designing, over requiring what we really need. So
And that's, yeah,
we've been through that first side and we still haven't got by that yet. So I just don't wanna make sure we don't put ourselves in a trap in a corner. So it's gonna make life in the future very difficult.
yeah, we're aware of the
Okay.
track.
All right, fine.
And it is not currently impacting the permitting program,
No, I know that.
Yeah. but I understand what you're saying. I've heard them say it as well.
Mike, was there something?
Yeah, Madam President, just again, back to the what it is and what is this not, so. We've been coordinating and the board has already seen some of the. Excuse me, emergency management. Efforts are back and forth with the two counties. So one thing that we haven't done though is, and none of this is evaluate. What areas of the community where it's just houses and not some major infrastructure, are there any elderly or disabled or other that would, need to be potentially evacuated or things like that, would have difficulty getting out of their homes perhaps, so. And there's not a lot of that either, but we've only done one portion of the district so far. The other, again, going to what it is and what it is not, is that when you take the area around Aldi's and that Target and over there, that all historically, if we go back to the early surveys and all the information, that was entirely a wetland complex. So now, rather than being able to store water prior to the going downstream, it's now, it's 100% of it is just going downstream, and so that's why you see those darker impacted areas in the report around the Walmart and some of that other areas. So, in addition to the miles of channeled wetlands that have occurred. So, again, going back to like thinking about the function and purpose of the watershed district is like, yes, the city of Forsyth has a concern, but there's other downstream residents and entities that is beyond even Covered Lake, right? So we're into, into the Sunrise as a whole. And that's where I kind of go back to the one wetland complex on the south side of Albany's. You can just drive by and casually see that it's largely filled with sediment, or at least it has the appearance of being filled from a period of time when there was no regulations for erosion sediment control. So that's a site where they're not going to be able to use it for stormwater requirements because it's already a wetland complex. But I believe that that's a good site which has been identified by the report, for making the case to the agencies, which we've done elsewhere, of doing a wetland restoration So you're restoring the functionality of the wetland, but it would also provide storage if we're physically removing how many truckloads of sediment out of the whole thing to begin with, so. I'm just somewhat speculating, but again, you can just stand at the sidewalk and look at it, and you can see that it's impacted. So, so I think that's, again, kind of to what the effort is and what it is not. You know, there's a benefit to, you know, the city and the district and the residents as a whole, because it's in the near the top of the drainage area for that whole system.
Right.
So,
Well, again, I think, you've already made some adjustments, and so they're not even coming to our meeting, right? Because they're satisfied with what you've already given them. So that's a step in the right direction, because these same staff people that we're working with are feeding whatever information they want to feed to the city council. City council's not hearing directly from us. They're getting it through those staff people.
no, they're watching the meetings recordings.
Well, I know, but I'm still saying, what the heck, that's. We've got to be able to work together this whole thing, so we got to understand who the players are and how to work with them, it's as simple as that, so.
I wanna ask you what wetland complex you're talking about, the one behind Applebee's or? I mean,
I
that's south,
believe so, yeah, south of
Yeah.
Aldi's, I don't know if we wanna. Let's see,
because there's not much left in that area.
right, but yeah, if you look at the whole historical, let's see, is that? I think of the word that. Yeah, there's that one, so this is the wetland complex right here,
Mhm.
but, you know,
And where's Applebee's?
I think right here.
Okay,
Right.
all right.
So then there's, or the outer parts of
Yeah.
the St. Croix in there, so whatever, but this wetland complex here.
Mhm.
But if you can imagine this, largely, this entire area was a wetland prior to any development, of course,
Sure.
so it was just. So, and there's a similar wetland on the other side that. There's. The notion is that, well, it's all marked as. Potentially, it's like, we're not trying to create wetland, we're not trying to flood the buildable land. But it's a ditched wetland complex where I think the owner could receive a payment. And get something for the wetland piece and just make the wetland wetter and longer. So it's not, because it's at the very top, at the edge of the district. It's not potentially, you would just hold the water in the area that it's intended to be. So I think those are continued conversations that need to occur once we get into the implementation base side of it, so.
My second office for my company, it was right across the street from that festival or whatever, before the Aldi stuff. And this would have been 98. And it just, every rain, there was, this much water. It was almost above your car wheels. They didn't do anything. I mean, when that happened, it cleared out part of that wetland, but they didn't do anything to direct the water, so it just sat there. And before Target and Walmart, that was a big wetland complex. Right on the side of 35, and so that's where the water eventually would go. But when it all became concrete and commercial, they didn't do anything to really solve the problem, so. That's, that's kind of,
Permitting, right?
yeah, exactly, that's kind of the history here of the city, as it was after the fact always. But that was crazy in a growing commercial area.
I'm kind of a novice, but I'm just looking at the map here. And it looks to me, based on what I'm seeing here, that there's as much wetland as there is city on this map.
But that's just the flood area.
So the two shades on there, and it's probably, it's. Developed more in the, you can see more of these maps within the framework. But the two shades on there, the light blue is the 100-year footprint, so if we got 100-year rainfall today, that's the Atlas 14. That's the Atlas 14 rainfall. And if we got a future rainfall, that's the dark blue, it would expand. And you can see kind of in that downtown area, how you have some dark blue expansions, so. The two areas that you're kind of looking at here are here's our current infrastructure
Mhm.
with the current, this light blue.
Yep.
And then if we got that 100-year rainfall on that infrastructure, it would expand around here, or it would, expand a couple inches or a couple inches to feet higher. So that's what these are trying to show is the expanded inundation footprint of where you would have water. If we didn't do anything, but sure, and and that's what we tried to lay out in here. This first slide,
What's there's a lot of square footage up top.
yeah, that's all, a lot of that is farm fields. And
Like usable farm fields?
some of them, yeah.
Okay.
Bixby Park,
What's that?
at Bixby Park. This,
Oh, I'm sorry, that's north of
Yeah.
Highway 5.
and this is another wetland with those.
Yeah.
This is Broadway, so this whole area
So what?
already is a wetland complex.
Yeah.
So we would expect it to.
So it's actually be wet.
Yeah.
and
Right,
flood.
but that's a lot of square footage. Couldn't we just take a bunch of dirt out of there and make it hold more water?
We have
We've
done.
already done that.
Yeah. That was, that project's pretty
One of our first
successful.
projects.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, and they re-meandered, what was a lateral into ditch one there.
Sure,
And made it more like a stream, if you will, and spread the water throughout Bixby instead of hitting just at one spot.
And we are looking at that, we have a project that Ann started last year, which is the Sunrise River project, where we're trying to look for more opportunities like that in there. Some of these wetlands, you can't just go dig them out because they're high priority wetlands or they have really good vegetation. Other areas are areas that have kind of turned into wetland because we've developed all of this
Yeah.
watershed upstream, and they've just gotten more and more wet over time, and now they're struggling in the last 10 to 20 years. And I was thinking of the area north of Highway 5 there. I think that's when we start getting into some of those areas that.
oh, wait, 8, did you say? Is it 8? Yeah,
yeah.
Eight.
Eight.
okay,
Well, that gets me back to my question about the Archie Ducharme farm, which is in perpetuity, I think, a storage area for water coming out of Washington County, which is Forest Lake. So how much could be stored there? I mean, can it handle so many inches over that whole 40 acres or?
And that can be addressed kind of in our next
Okay.
phase.
Okay.
But I will say, you're right, the wetlands are protecting a lot of this infrastructure, so it is really. The district is fortunate to have that in terms
thinking of all the different places that don't have a gigantic area like that
Yeah.
for water.
Mhm.
The only other question that I had that I'm thinking about, you've identified all the potential areas for doing things. And it sounded to me like we don't need to do them all. What percentage of what we're looking at as options do we need to do in your estimation? And that way, I mean, if you've got a map of 30 different things, but we only need to do 8 of the 30.
Yeah.
Then maybe that calms some folks down when they see a map with 30
Yeah.
things on it. I'm just wondering if there's some information there.
Yeah, so a typical project that we're all used to is like a water quality project where we have a diagnostic phase, which is. Actually, you have a planning phase, diagnostic phase, we're kind of in that zone right now, then you go to feasibility, which we have a grant for. In that feasibility stage, we take all these concepts, prioritize them based on if they're even workable. Based on partner feedback, based on elevations, based on how much water we can actually put there. And then the current,
Cost per acre.
exactly, cost benefit analysis. Exactly, and also co-benefits, I think that
Right.
will factor in. And then in our current grant, we said we were gonna take 1 or 2 to a design, and that would, you have to design it before then you can implement it. So we're kind of slowly narrowing down the process.
And right now, we want to start with as many opportunities as we can, just because, and we want to keep them in our plan. Right now, I don't want to say, oh, the city said no, so let's take them out. We just want to keep that record. And even if the city continues to say no for the next 5 to 10 years, at least we have it, that we've looked at that area and that we have that record.
Yeah.
So, that was one comment that they had recently, was like, hey, you can take out some of this, and we're just like, no, we just wanna keep it in there for, like, when somebody goes back, and the next board, or the next, engineers or whoever looks back at this in 20 years, they'll know that, like, okay, we have looked at that spot before.
And we noted their comments.
Yeah.
The red line, so we know what they said about it.
I was extra concerned last time because as the things were discussed and numbers were talked about, I heard and saw yellow cat machines and beeping and dirt being torn up and like.
No, it's a lot.
I just saw,
It's a very
I just saw a bunch of equipment tearing up Forest Lane.
Nothing goes that fast.
I just,
This district moves pretty fast, but I think, yeah.
Right, but I mean, but there are some where, like the one wetland example, again, I'll just note that. It's on the west side of 35, it's on the edge of the district. No, making it wetter just means putting a berm to hold the water, so it can't get out as fast because it's ditched right now, which is not natural, right? So wetlands should not have been ditching, so, but as a discussion and trying to also just help everyone explain and I'm sure that the guy that bought it, he bought it in 2005. Thinking that I'm gonna fill it all in and make more target space, right? And so this would be a way for him to capture something financially, because he probably didn't figure that in. But I mean, filling in a wetland costs money too, right? So that's why a lot of places don't do it. But even back then, before there were regulations, still, you had to haul the material in, or dig out all the soft stuff and haul the other stuff in, so. It's not like it was inexpensive, it had to be like a Target or something else, right? So it's Walmart or something, right? So bigger pockets, dig deeper. So there's that side of it. Shallow pond, which after July 1st, we will immediately turn and burn on that. Property that the Audubon wants to give to us, so, and over the years, dealing with the name Archie Ducharme, so he's. We're in this other end of the southern Chisago County, right? His house was right on the border with Washington County there, so off of Highway 61. And so that channel was a couple miles further north, the culvert exiting Shallow Pond, but sometimes plugged with debris. And we're not, it's a city culvert, we're not out looking at all the culverts, and really frankly, you'd have to be around on the other side, even someone from the city wouldn't see it, right? So, well, we know that on several occasions that got plugged up, and there was as much as 2 feet of water being stored, because then it was backing all the way back, and Charlie would call me and say, "Hey, Mike, think there's something wrong with the channel here," and because the water was still at his place, so it wasn't flowing anymore. So that's a lot of storage. And nobody was complaining. So that tells us that, we're not necessarily impacting any other private entities. We still, through our due diligence part, will communicate with the Greenbelt kind of effort. We'll communicate and acquire easements and whatever else. But to the question earlier, like how much can we put there? A lot, frankly. So, but that's all will have to be work through, over time, it'll be a very long effort on that particular one, and it's not even part of this whole first planning phase side.
Not in the ranked 1 and 2 priorities at this time, yeah.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean it can't be a separate investigation.
Yeah.
One of the things Mike mentioned the other day when we were together was part of this was thinking about the right sizing of culverts and things like that. And then when road work's being done, this has been identified to be upgraded or changed or something like that. And that seems to make good, smart sense to me. On how the plans.
Yeah, we should
We
go.
have 3 slides of like some of the other results. Jim, do you want me to kind of just talk about those? So yeah, this first one is just so the first thing we looked at was just critical infrastructure. We looked at, if the floodplain increases from that light blue to the dark blue, does any of our critical infrastructure get impacted? The hospitals, police, fire stations, schools, churches, electrical substations, those things that like are, cause a lot of, damage, that's where your risk is high. And what we got from the analysis is that there's, no hospitals or critical infrastructure are flooded or within 15 feet of that flood footprint under current and future precipitation conditions. So we did well in planning those efforts, so far, and that, those we don't have to worry about getting higher or getting to them. There was one access route that got overtopped. And there are some access routes. One example that's highlighted in there was there's 1.3 feet projected on First Street Northeast in the future, which provides primary access to the Faith Lutheran Church. So, that church could go without, access for a couple days or not. But this table here is just showing, we looked at under the present or 10-year event and future 10-year event, and then the present 100-year event and the future 100-year event, how many additional roadways would be flooded? So, you look at in Forest Lake, we go from 39 in the current 100-year rain event, 39 roadways overtop or are flooded. And, in the future, if we weren't to do anything to infrastructure or look for anything, and that also assumes that we don't add impervious surface in the, between now and then, which we know more impervious surface will be introduced. 9 additional roadways would be flooded. And then between the Shields Lake drainage area and the Forest Lake urban corridor, Little South Comfort area, we're looking at 64 total, compared to 52 existing. So that was one thing we looked at, was just some of those roadways and how deep they are. Because some of those roadways, that could, in some other analyses that could go up double or, triple, or you could see that, okay, it overtops here and then down here creates a dam, and you could really, start impacting places. But another thing we looked at on the next slide here is the number of buildings. Again, right now, there's probably 155 buildings that are, within 15 feet of that floodplain footprint. And under the future, it jumps to 194. Across those two, there's a 65, structure increase. So that'd be 65 additional houses in the future that would be, or houses or building structures that could be flooded if this trend continues, we take no action. And and that doesn't even assume we continue to allow development to occur.
So 229,
Structures are within
would
that
be at
50
risk of within 15 feet of water.
Yeah,
And the 15 feet is like kind of our error bars, because all this is based on LiDAR, which is you take from the aerials.
yeah.
That's just kind of our margin of error, that 15 feet.
15 feet is somewhat conservative, but when we're looking at those elevations, we're looking at LiDAR, and I don't know if you're familiar with LiDAR, but it's just like this, reflection. So a lot of times we go and survey, especially wetlands or something, the true ground elevation is lower because you don't have things like vegetation interfering with it. So that 15 feet gives us
It's like a factor of safety.
Yeah. So, and then the last thing we looked at was that network limitations, or that storm sewer. If you go to the next slide. And these hydraulic diagnostics pinpointed capacity bottlenecks within that system. And you can see the red or some of these areas where we have constrained conveyance or surcharge conditions that propagate upstream through manholes and catch basins, and that'll lead to additional surface flooding at multiple low points.
That's west of the freeway.
This is the
35?
same
These are all the
area.
yeah, these are all the
This is
same
downtown.
areas. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is downtown.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I think what does it say there? approximately 100 pipe segments ranging from 1 to 2 feet in diameter shown to be undersized, or in undersized, it's their design flow capacity is exceeded. And the amount of time a pipe operates exceeding its design capacity is important. The longer the time a pipe or network of pipes operates over its capacity, the longer and more severe the localized flooding becomes. So duration of those things being greater than an hour is considered problematic, because that means it's backing up, it's surcharging storm sewers, that flooded area can go into the streets and.
Well, tell me where that is exactly. Is that by the turnaround or the roundabout, I mean, in downtown, or where is it?
Whereas, so all of these red pipes are the ones that we're showing that exceed, so this is the pipe networks here. These are the actual pipe sections.
No, I get that.
Yeah, the
part.
round,
What-
wait to the roundabout so that she knows where that is.
Where is
Yeah,
it?
right there.
Oh, there we go. Oh, it's right there.
Yeah.
The center of downtown.
Yeah,
Holy moly.
so a lot of these are, again, they're, this map and, probably.
And they're inadequate?
They're not inadequate, it's just, a lot of times we design, storm sewer to handle the 10-year storm event.
Okay,
So that's the design capacity, so that's what we looked at.
so
But
what is this one? Technically,
it's definitely below the future 10-year, because our 10-year, again, has gone up. The 10-year,
this was just done when that roundabout was put in, which was probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago, maybe
Okay.
tops.
No, those pipes are further north of that.
Yeah,
Are they?
And they didn't stay
Well, where's the turnaround? He said it's right up
3
there.
blocks from the pipes.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah, here, that goes,
That's all-
that
You're
goes
talking about
out.
the park and all that area right there.
All this water goes down from the,
and those are looking pretty good.
so.
Broadway was what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's all.
Broadway, yeah,
Broadway.
and all
But
the
the
Broadway,
That's all the new
all
stuff.
old stuff.
right, that
Okay.
goes into that,
I mean,
into that pond over there.
Yeah, okay.
But when they're looking at future road
Yeah.
replacements or utility replacements, then we kind of have this map to show,
Sure.
okay,
Yeah, I just wanted
Might
to
be a
know
good
where it was
opportunity to-
because that was a relatively new area.
Yeah.
So it's above, is what you're saying. It's north of that by 2 or 3 houses, or not houses, but commercial,
Lots. Yeah.
commercial buildings.
obviously your nomenclature has to be changed so you can read it easier.
yes, the colors are
yeah, the
tough,
colors are.
Yeah, somebody's gonna see this other, so make it so they can see it.
will do.
Mike had commented about sometimes the culverts or those tubes are too small. Sometimes they're too big, they're letting too much water through. Do we have any situations where there's too much flow, where if we could slow it down, it would be beneficial?
I don't know if we analyzed where they're too large. I think areas on here where they might be too large is if you would see a green, stem somewhere in this red area where like they would be oversized, but
I
They're
see.
putting too much water to a too small a pipe.
yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to create these all the same kind of size, and plan for them, upgrade them as needed as you have additional build out. To kind of keep up with, the increased rain from those impervious areas, but
Are any of these identified as corrugated or cement, separated out?
I don't know if we have, our model definitely has like whether the type pipe the corrugated, but it doesn't have like the condition. I don't know if we would have to dig into when that was installed and whatnot, but yeah, corrugated pipe is a good example of one that has kind of 50-year lifespan and that starts really deteriorating and
But he was mentioning there's a certain level of flow and that with corrugated it slows down the water through there. Maybe that's beneficial during certain circumstances or not. And then if you make them and they're cement and they're smooth, then
yeah.
it's really gonna pump water through and then sometimes that's a bad thing too.
Yeah, so when you're looking at hydraulics, so a lot of times, if you're trying to manage. Let's say you're replacing a bridge along a large riverine corridor. You don't wanna just upsize that bridge, because that could let more flow down to the next section, but the next bridge was designed properly or whatever, and now you flood that section in between. You also don't wanna really change the material type unless you're also altering the upstream or downstream, or altering the shape of it, or altering the size of it, cause you wanna maintain flow. So if we're gonna redo a culvert, let's say they're putting in a nicer road. They're gonna upgrade a dirt county road, they're gonna pave it, they're gonna put a bridge in, they're likely gonna put a concrete. Structure in there. You can do that, but you just have to do some hydraulic modeling to make sure that smoothness or that Manning's roughness factor. The increased flow that you get from that, you change it by either altering the upstream and downstream elevation of that, so it has less drop, so that will reduce flow and counteract that, or you change the shape or the size. And that's called a no-rise analysis, so that's something that the DNR, we require for any of these upgrades. Yeah, we wouldn't just wanna replace it in kind. If it was, a big oval, deteriorated CNP pipe, corrugated metal pipe.
So they might not have to put a bigger pipe, but maybe changing the material of the pipe. It
Yeah.
just all depends
Yeah.
on what the network looks like.
Sorry to go over some of this stuff.
No, that's fine. We've got time.
No, but I think kind of the overall conclusions we got was that there is stormwater network undersized for current standards throughout the city. Current standards mean that 10-year storm event, that it's surcharged and it's undersized in some places. But luckily, there was no critical infrastructure affected right now or in the future. There are maybe some accesses to them that would be shut down, but that's one thing that we can walk away with of just, hey, that's a good thing to know. There is a significant increase in number of buildings and roadways flooded or likely flooded in the future, and then the Sunrise River flow. And this is one thing where we're also trying to reduce, flows and velocities to that Sunrise River, and that's another reason there are these wetlands downstream, but we can't just let it get to the wetlands unless we can continue to reduce velocities and flows to some of those areas at the end of the Sunrise River, because they're feeling these increases, and they will in the future if we do nothing.
And especially in a really sediment laden
Yeah.
situation, or additional erosion causes problems for downstream infrastructure and the function of those wetlands as well, so we don't wanna.
Well, how do you stop that if you're increasing the velocity and increasing the flow? How do you stop that deterioration?
Well, you do it by holding some water back and releasing it slower, or implementing some
Mhm.
flood mitigation, capturing it and reducing it, not just sending it all to that Sunrise River where it continues to increase flows and velocities.
But we
Okay,
also included some talk about stream stabilization in midterm,
Mhm.
in the framework for midterm projects.
or meandering it, can't do that anymore because it's too developed.
Within the Sunrise River, there might be some opportunities for meandering it, but a meander isn't gonna give you the, floodplain benefit.
Okay.
Unless you kind of do it in stages, but,
Yeah, so if a Ducharme farm is used to hold water, just wanna make sure I understand this. Because you're indicating increasing on that slide. So the water would be held on the Ducharme farm and then allowed to come down like a river, basically, right? Holding it, decreasing velocity, I would think. The flow might be better, might be higher, but I would think the velocity would go down.
Right,
hopefully the flow and the velocity goes down.
Okay.
because the water will also infiltrate, evaporate, be used by plants,
Uh-huh,
Yeah,
all those sort of things.
okay.
Storms can look like
Mhm.
kind of a big peak, and how fast that peak hits
Uh-huh.
your resource has
Yeah.
a big impact on how much flood and erosion.
Yeah, I just find that to be confusing. So what I really hear you saying is that we're going to have a hold system for the water, right? And then the flow and the velocity, shouldn't that reduce?
so this increase in Sunrise River flow
Yeah.
and velocity. is what we see in future conditions if we don't do anything.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
you know,
okay.
And that's what
okay.
we're saying, it could increase, if. We saw an increase when we did nothing, when we just ran those, the 9.22 inch bed, we saw an increase in flow and of velocity. Of greater
Okay.
than 15%, saying that it would cause further harm
Okay,
than just, today's. Yeah,
okay, so the top bullet then means the stormwater network as it exists today is undersized. Okay, and this is the outcome that you could expect. Okay, can you clarify that a little better on that slide? These are good slides. I just want them to be
yeah,
yeah,
easy to understand.
so I'm sorry, was there still a question you had?
No,
No, okay.
just clarification
Yep.
is all.
Okay. And then kind of these last two are just, we think that some of these proposed actions outlined in here, some of this short-term, midterm, and long-term will significantly mitigate some of these impacts we talked about. The increased number of roadways, and buildings flooded, the increased flows, and the tax on the stormwater network. And then, this just outlines the role identification, coordination, buying from cities, counties, MnDOT, landowners are key to kind of move to these next steps on planning some of these
Mhm.
projects and implementing some of these other policies and.
Mhm.
So.
I have two questions. The first one is, there is a big wetland, right, on Broadway as it reaches, 35. It's on the north side. Did you look at that at all as potential area to hold water? It's right by, it butts up against, Bixby Park.
And are you familiar with that area?
No, it's the big, you know which one I'm talking about, Mike, don't you? It's owned by, I forget who it is.
So here's.
The guy who
Nope,
owns
that's
that
eight,
first
go
car
south.
wash.
Right there, just north of that,
Just right here.
right there.
Bob McCollum.
Yeah, McCullough. Mhm.
Okay.
I don't know how many acres are there, but
Sure.
it's big and I would think it would be important to keep.
Okay. Northeast quarter, probably 35.
We offered to sell it to the city and the district for about $4.5 million.
Yeah. It's the one that has the post, the big,
That's what?
If it was filled.
the big signage.
Right,
okay.
Yeah.
On it, there's a
The
couple
wetland.
of them, couple different ones.
right. But if you can sell it to the city, then the city can change
You
it.
said, Jack, you said you had two questions. What
Then
was your
maybe
second?
that's.
Oh, the other one
Yeah.
is
Well,
the
yeah, the private party.
wetland,
It'll never
that
sell to that,
is,
but maybe if you had a city.
that's right by,
Change it.
the one I talked about,
Yeah, but they
earlier,
still
by
gotta, they gotta
Broadway
go up with.
Avenue, that's right downtown.
I mean,
As you turn off the freeway.
Work.
So it's right there. The one I'm talking about now is the
Yeah.
next one, down, but it's on 61 and 8.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah,
Site nine, maybe?
if you go,
Low price, because.
you go
Right.
right along,
Here's
Highway 8.
And here's 61.
yeah,
So
So-
this is site 8 here.
it would be going east. So right along that corridor, it's a very, it's not a traditional wetland that we see with cattails. It's got trees and bushes and all kinds. So it's a higher quality wetland.
Okay,
And there are houses along the road furthest away. So you don't see as many of the houses, a little bit up on the back end, but mostly it's this wetland. And in that wetland is a ditch of some kind that runs through it. That I think comes from underneath.
I think we're talking
Freeway.
about site 9.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
the top star,
Okay,
that's site 9, I think. Is right?
yeah, there it is.
okay,
Yeah,
So we did.
yeah,
all right,
good.
no one's highlighted.
And what about that? what's your recommendation? Do you have one?
I don't know if we have a recommendation.
Okay.
for
These are
projects
just
right there.
concepts. if
It's
it's
just, I think we noted
But they're
that
highlighted.
is a good
Yes,
spot.
okay.
That is one of the 13 that we talked about.
Yeah, and the other part about that in one of your other projects you did for us, that's a highly sensitive groundwater area. So we need to keep that in mind too.
Definitely. We only have a couple more slides.
Four.
Yeah, these were some of the sites, we're gonna continue to look for opportunities, this isn't even all the sites, there are two more that aren't on this photo. But these were just kind of opportunities we saw, that Forest Lake responded to. We prioritize, city stormwater infrastructure, maintenance upgrades, we'll continue public outreach campaign and small scale residential project incentives and, yeah, I think the next slide goes over some of the
Yeah, here's the cities.
city's comments. So these were some of this is kind of a highlight of the city's comments that Emily put together, but they just asked us to refrain from adjusting regulations so as not to hinder development or city projects. That's what we go to, where they just don't want us to say, hey, this 2100 or 2100 floodplain that you're estimating, don't say that's our floodplain standard now. But I think, that is something we should look at when we have development in there of just saying, let's take a look to see if the 2 feet of freeboard that we're requiring now does still get them above that elevation, because that's some resiliency we're already building in, or, can they build it 3 feet? Can we get 3 feet there? Would it be that hard? And maybe just making sure they're aware of that. And that maybe there's some opportunities to build some resiliency in there. Preserve developable land, they just don't want us to put these big, wetlands and stuff. Or these big areas in land that they think that they're gonna get developable places out of, so.
They understand the purpose of this, don't they?
And that's where
I mean,
I
I'm
think
getting.
they understand the purpose of it, I think. My guess, and I don't wanna put words in their mouth, but my guess is they thought that we were looking to do projects. We were planning projects in these areas, like, here's where we're gonna do our projects, rather than here are opportunities. And
Well, more than opportunities, here is how you protect the citizens
yeah.
from
some
future
of that-
damage and expense
Yeah.
and maybe losing their homes and all that kind of stuff. So, we have to make sure they understand what the point is, what the purpose is.
And I think that was brought up, Steve, I think you brought that up at the last meeting too.
Yeah, and all the question is who's responsible, I mean, the survey says that people expect the city to run this whole thing. We're doing the work for the city again.
Well, I think we can do our best to make sure that the city and like Ann said before, this is a study that the watershed should lead.
Mhm.
And we can make sure that the city knows about some of these risks and developers and homeowners. So when they buy, houses in these developments, they're aware that this place it could flood in the future. And right now, they're not paying flood insurance.
Right.
If they're outside of these existing FEMA flood zones, they're not paying flood insurance, but I would like to know if, it's gonna flood, so we can bring awareness to that without
Mhm.
hindering it, or see if those developers, knowing that it's in maybe this potential resiliency flood zone or this overlay
Mhm.
zone. Hey, let's look at seeing if we can, provide 3 feet of freeboard or something in there. We might have to put it on them, but it's ultimately the cities that run that, floodplain, insurance programs and.
Has our program that you developed for us to do all of this work, are we capable of showing in graphic detail what that looks like when you get a bigger rain in any of these areas that we prioritize?
In some of these areas where we have a 2D, we can show that live. We can show like, here's how that footprint, and this is where water
Mhm.
goes on the surfaces that we have. This is where it goes, and that's what we're trying to show with these inundation zones. we just showed a snippet of these maps, but a lot, the maps in these two priority zones are out in the. Are in the floodplain, framework,
Mhm.
all those maps are in there.
Yeah, I know, but visually showing. This is what it looks like when you get a 6-inch rain, this is what it looks like when you get a 2-inch rain, whatever, in these prioritized areas. It's so powerful to see that, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to end up with that type of a program too, because it's so helpful for permitting. you know?
Generated images of what,
Yeah.
like a storefront would look like with
Yeah.
a foot of water. I think we are capable of doing
Yeah.
that, if that is something that you would like to have.
Have we ever had standing water enforcement?
I just talked about it in, the late 90s. And that was the place right over by, right across from Walmart and Target. There's that little development area and, Mike was mentioning Aldi.
Mhm.
And then there's the dog place next door and there's Applebee's over there. My office, my second office was right here across from all of this.
Hmm.
It was in the, I don't know, it's a salon for women. I don't know, yes, with a A. It's a famous one, can't think of it, but anyway. Anyway, Aveda, yeah, Aveda. So I had a 2-person office there and I was, every time it rained, looking across at this big parking lot that was just, this 2 foot that you're talking about of water or higher sometimes. Would just pile up.
Every time it rained?
Every time it rained.
So,
They didn't
but it
have-
doesn't do that now.
No,
Okay.
no, because they corrected it by building a bigger culvert underneath the roadways and matched it up with the one that Walmart has. So all of that water now goes underneath the road and then into the pipes, or not pipes, but the open ditches that come behind Walmart.
Okay.
So all I'm saying is that there was development before there was a consideration of the rainfall.
Sure.
And what are you gonna do with all that rain? And that's the point, is that we don't wanna get to that point, go backwards. So we have to get them to understand how important this is. You don't wanna repeat that.
And sometimes citizens will come to these meetings about flooding on their land after certain projects or rain events and have questions about it. So it is something that sometimes we use the model to show where that's coming from or where a pinch point might be. So it is something that happens.
Are we tracking that now with when it rains? Where are we having any water issues?
I mean, we note every time someone brings it up to us, and we also did all these workshops to incorporate like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm seeing that on my property, this is happening, and that we were incorporating that feedback into the model.
The city really should be in cooperation with the district, monitoring that too. I hope they should be. Those hot spots.
They were part of the workshops to tell us where
Yeah.
spots are that weren't captured by
Yeah,
the preliminary models. So,
but I'm talking about when it happens.
yeah,
There should be some reporting that goes between the two of us. The two entities.
I think informally, it has been pretty consistent between the Public Works Office and the district,
Good, that's great.
so
Good to hear.
good collaboration and cooperation.
Mhm.
Dave Adams there, so.
It's great.
Forgot where I was on here.
I think we're on the third.
All right, any flood storage projects constructed? Yeah, so. Their third comment was just any of these flood storage projects, it shouldn't just be flood. We should look at staff benefits and that's fine. We can incorporate that. And they're also. Now required to do some water quality and volume control projects for the city roadways and projects. And they've highlighted these areas as possible areas where they would implement. That water quality and rate and volume controls. So I think there's opportunities to include their needs and oversize them and, so we'll just have to make sure that we work with them to incorporate that. They are supportive of some of the projects downstream of city boundaries and within the MnDOT right of way. And then the city did request responses to 4 specific questions, comments regarding regulations, potential project timelines, funding sources, stormwater credits, and I think that's where. I'm not trying to put words in their mouth, where I think they were, they thought we might have been further along than we were. Rather than just putting together a framework and highlighting opportunities, to kind of,
Oh, they thought we were ready to go.
yeah,
Okay.
and that's my thought, but I
Mhm.
think this is a good time to, you know. And I think if we go to the next slide, it's just, we're trying to get an agreed upon framework. And everybody can agree with this, the analysis and these next steps, and then in the next steps, we continue working with the city to implement their needs into some of these areas and sites we identified as potential mitigation areas. We can incorporate stack benefits, and if we can identify additional nature-based resilient solutions in the Sunrise River, which we're working on. Highway 61 is a good example. Or the Highway 61 wetland. Is a good example, and then we can also implement some additional short-term mitigation actions that's identified. These will help out with some of the storm sewer network issues like additional green infrastructure retrofits, adopted updated stormwater management rules, work with city forest like to prioritize stormwater infrastructure like the pipes, ditches and crossings that Jim was talking about. And then in coordination with the cities develop flood reduction community outreach plans and incentives. Maybe there are some incentives we can work on for these developers to, you know, incorporate some of this resiliency into their developments. And then the long-term mitigation actions will continue to monitor Atlas 15 updates as we get more and more data. These trends and stuff, you know, might change or might continue or might get worse, but we'll continue to monitor it. And then just continue with City Forest Lake to identify and repair and replace some of those key capacity storm sewer pipes to achieve that current 10-year standard, or
Mhm.
maybe look at the future, so. Yeah, I think the next assessment phase just help target where to add the needed 99 acre feet and implement other mitigation strategies of stack benefits. As of now, we've already achieved 40 acre feet. I think that's like 39.8 acre feet through quite a few projects. The tax 4-foot wetland, which is shown here, that was about 26 acre feet, but this also removed 90 pounds per year of TP, and it also created 22 acres of habitat. So that's where I'm saying we have some of these opportunities for stack benefits. And
What
then
about sediment? Did you capture the sediment?
Yeah, so we also most recently in 2024 monitored this and we saw that it actually removed 200 pounds per year of phosphorus. And it also removed about 9,000 pounds of sediment.
Oh my
So
God.
it's performing really well.
Wow. That we ought to publish that. It's incredible.
And then some other projects, we completed the Bone Lake Northeast Legacy Wetland Restoration, that was 3.5 acre feet. The WJD 6 Wetland Restoration 2024, that was 8.7 acre feet. And the Moody Lake Capstone projects that were completed in 2024 was 1.3 acre feet, so we have that 26, and there's 3 or 4 more projects that add up, or 3 more projects that add up to that 39.8. So.
Oh my God, that's incredible. It's a good project.
All right, so I'll just end with the conclusions again. We've already kind of heard this, but all of this flood planning is about risk management for water resources, infrastructure, and people who live within the watershed district. This is our planning framework that we can use in perpetuity, even when we get new information about different storm forecasting. We have our priority areas, we have our model built out, and then those future, those like future storms can be run through the model, so we can decide. Resiliency planning is a good thing to be proactive instead of reactive. This framework provides some options and we'll further evaluate those options. And it also, not only those projects, but it also provides short-term, medium-term, and long-term policies that both we can implement, our partners can implement, and also, as upgrades are being made throughout the city, we can also look at infrastructure that can be upgraded. And as I've said, we have a grant that we can further investigate these concepts and look at those cost benefit analyses.
Yeah. I think that's another good side that just needs to put the citizen protection aspect in there. You said it when you first started out. And so if that can be put in there as well. And then along with that, what would be really, really important, we can get it. In your slide last time, it talked about the increase in the insurance rates in Minnesota. And it was 38% higher than previously because of all of the storm events and all of that. If we could get a something from maybe the insurance society or something, association, that would predict if we put all of this together and protect our areas best we can with engineering and science, what impact might that have on lowering the insurance rates? Because that is a big topic that really doesn't get talked about a lot. And that would be very important, I think, for any local government unit that we deal with on how that really translates into the outcome of that, protecting people from these ridiculous insurance responses to any calamity. They lose their houses, they lose their everything, and they get very little back from insurance that they paid into. And I get it. I mean, that's a risk industry. So let's see if we can quantify the impact of doing projects like this.
Yeah, there might be something we can do to, tie that increase, structure. Into some sort of, I think
at this point, we didn't want to conflate insurance in the framework, but I think maybe when we talk about the cost benefit, that could be convincing.
Yeah, for some of these, projects, you could take that into account.
Well, that's a benefit, certainly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think the insurance company is gonna lower their rates in Forest Lake because we did some water projects and when they raised the rates in Minnesota because of the weather. I'm just thinking macro there. That's great. You guys are gonna have less claims. But we're just gonna take that as a win as the insurance company and not have to pay out as much. That's unfortunately, because we're small. If it was a whole Minnesota doing something, maybe different, but
Would be.
yeah.
Managers, and there's some managers. One is though, is that most people don't get flood insurance.
Right.
So if they have that, then they're just not covered, right?
Right.
So that's the prevention side.
Yeah.
So which, and most people, as noted earlier, probably are not aware that they may be in such a zone. So. And whether agents are looking at this stuff, as we're talking.
Yeah.
Or, not either side of it, but.
Any other comments from any of the board?
Good stuff.
Mhm.
So next steps, then we're gonna start trying to, we've got our grant now, so we can start zeroing in on some projects.
Yeah. I guess immediate next steps would be to approve the framework at the board meeting this week. Yeah, Thursday.
Yeah,
And then we can start working on the grant.
that's great. We wanted to talk with, I think more information on the city. Have we talked about that enough? We're bringing up some things that we wanted to wait until the end to discuss.
Well, I think we had a good discussion. I mean, we're just concerned about them getting the wrong impression based on
Well-
precedent that occurred from us, so we
Yeah.
don't wanna fall into that trap.
Yeah,
And then we just wanna make sure that we actually do reach the city council with the.
well, we were talking about, you brought up, responding to the letter from the city. And you've had conversations with them, but have they sent anything in writing
Oh, yeah.
as a response?
Yeah, through emails, right, Emily particularly has been leading this effort along. We've been copied, we've been back and forth and received
Mhm.
comments and they made a point of at the staff level, making sure their engineers reviewing, providing comment back. So we don't know what's happened within the last council meeting or so, but from a discussion again, but
So, since we did that for them, they had promised us to give us their capital plans. Have we got their capital plans for the next 7 years?
they're, well, typically, I mean, we get their road plans, and I think we have their,
Do we?
yeah, I think we have that.
We also do have now a quarterly meeting with their development team, our staff and their staff.
Their first one.
Yeah. It's on my calendar. They're on my
Now,
calendar.
we got 2 weeks notice on the North Shore Trail.
Yeah.
Right, that was
Yeah.
to avoid that situation.
Yeah.
Well, yes, to your point, so from a road improvement side, I don't think they have, well. They have things identified with whether, like, it's all typically contingent on funding, right, so they're, that's their thing, but still. I mean, we're now veering into the discussion on the rules, which is not part of this discussion, so, but.
Right.
That's a, you know, yes, an overlapping but different topic.
Well, if there's any communication that you could share with the board about this, that you feel is appropriate, then make sure that the board is kept up to date on this progress, because it is a multi-step process, you know, and if we get to a point where the people that we work with, the staff, with you, and it's good, I think we should ask to be part of one of their meetings so that we can talk about it with them. And what we would like to see occur and what we perceive the future benefits to be. And start forming that relationship. But I don't like not responding to a personal letter that went to you and to me as the president. So I would like to have some type of response, even if it's, you know, we're working together, you know, we're reaching some goals and so on. I just think we need to do that.
Okay, yes, I think we can certainly do that, and I guess if nothing else, just. Thank their staff for, you know, helping to continue to facilitate. I guess when we were bringing the plan up for, it was tentatively late, April. We didn't see it as the same level of concern, obviously, so, but we were like, oh, well, yeah, tell us what you don't like about the wording, and just really the wording is such that it's not gonna change what we wanna do in terms of the next phase of project identification. So, it's not going to change policy, it's not going to change any future, grants or anything like that, so, but just, yeah, in general, I think it's been, cordial, bringing down the temperature. Obviously, they were very, I attended the meeting because of the city council meeting with the Tim's Marina piece, but they included a discussion on this, and they had 2 council members that were intending to attend a meeting, and we were like, oh, I guess I didn't realize it was so, that you were so concerned, but that's where, you know, getting back to at least the quarterly meetings, some of the managers will recall a couple city administrators ago, I was meeting monthly with the city administrator and the public works and their engineers, so there's just a lot going on within the city of Forest Lake that overlap. And we're just trying to provide synergy and mutual. Taxpayers don't really care who's doing the work, they just want a lot of this stuff done the most efficient way possible, and that's our desired outcome here, so it's not hurting us, but we do have a timeline on doing the grant, and we still have plenty of time, but we still want to get that next stuff done, because then once we get that, then we can take the results that whatever UR comes up with, and then start looking for grants, so, and often, you know, we've been on the fortunate side of of being within a window of when a grant might be just a one-off or something, so, and making sure that we can get in there, so. So we prefer not to delay, but it's not, waiting another month hasn't killed us,
No,
so.
you're building a relationship, so we need to do whatever steps are required to get to that.
Right, and we're
We're not in, a-
absolutely trying to be transparent and like, okay, here, whatever.
yeah,
Whatever, so I think it's been a good dialogue back and forth, so. But yes, so once we get to the next phase, I mean, right now, they have not communicated anyone intending to come to Thursday's meeting because they've been able to
Mhm.
make the necessary edits, couple back and forth, so, and Eric's been doing a lot of work on that side of it, so.
Okay.
Well, everything, thank you.
Anything else that we need to discuss on this issue?
Thanks to Eric and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a good presentation. We're fine. I
Absolutely.
think we're all on the same level now,
Mhm.
just really,
Yeah.
so thank you.
Yep, Manager Taves, anything from you?
No.
All right, thank you, Manager Baki.
No, thank you. That was very good.
All right, yeah, it was a good meeting. Thanks so much for everybody who's attending. Did a few people on the top, I don't know who they are, but
That's
Mike, me.
And me.
that's you.
We look better without our heads on.
From here down, it's good, yeah.
There we are.
All right,
Well, I think the only other thing to note is that we haven't done we have not, we haven't gone through the same level of effort to the entire district, but, this is in the early, and yes, so. That was 15 comes out, we'll start learning more and we'll want to, once we get the phase 2 for Bone Lake South, we'll want to look at that
Exactly.
site specifically because of its the potential there, I guess, so.
yeah, how many acres is that again? So,
It's 100 and, or no, excuse me, yeah, no, it's 117 acre wetland. But you could, with the right structure, you could put a 500-year storm in that of any harbor.
That one?
Well, like south, yeah.
all right, we are concluded with our
Based on-
meeting.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Earlier.
Thank you. Adjourn, is
So
there
we
a
wanted
second?
60, we wanted 60 more.
Is there a second to adjourn?
Sorry. Yes, second.
Okay. All those in favor? Roll call?
Roll call. Manager Baki,
I think he's gone already.
No, everybody's
No.
better.
Okay.
Thumbs up.
It was cracking his ear. I mean.
Manager Davis,
Aye.
Manager Schottenmiller,
Aye.
Manager Schultz, sorry,
Aye.
and President Anderson.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. See you on Thursday.
Yep.
Oh, we can't.